We've got a question on Instagram about how to stop being influenced by the RPE of the lifts that you hit last week and how that impacts your training like today or this week. Both Tyson and I can relate to the impact of expectation and the impact of what previous training session might have on your expectations for the next training session. The person that's asking is, how would you coach someone that has a tough time with training expectation and being influenced by the previous week's RPE for given lifts?
Coaching someone who is struggling to manage expectations with like what they did last week and what that means for like this individual session, what they can do today. I personally just moved the target, whether it be a programmed different like tempo or rep range. Just like it makes it easier to kind of like let go of the expectation of what you did last week. Because I can remember a very specific time in my strength journey where I was having a single at an 8 every week. And I was using that to make training decisions. But I also was like subtly really striving to I wanted that single at an 8 to go up every week. If it stayed the same for too many weeks, I was misrating my RPE. Like I wanted it to be a single at an 8, even though it was actually at a 9.
You just said it was an 8. And, moved a little slower than the last time you said that. Yeah, I definitely can relate as an athlete as well to that experience. Depending on how you view your training, it will impact how you view expectation and what you're supposed to be doing from week to week. When I was really heavy into emerging strategies and the relative success of any given block, within an emerging strategies framework, the idea is that you are supposed to build these development blocks that are contributing to your strength. And at the end of each block, you kind of rate how well you perform to the variables within each block. And as a result, you're kind of incentivized to push and increase the load in each week and convince yourself that each block is a success, because it's not great, writing off a development block is like a bad block, because especially if you like the variables in there, if you start noticing that your performance is decreasing each week, it's a bummer. It's like, oh, well, maybe I actually have to do something that I wasn't planning on wanting or needing. And so as a result, I was very incentivized to add weight each week, because if I did and the RPE was lower, then that would mean I did a good job. But that got taxing and draining, because eventually I had to realize that I wasn't actually getting better each week. And it wasn't as predictable as I wanted. And coming to that realization sucked, because it means that I don't have the ability to get stronger every single week on every exercise or on squat, bench, and deadlift. And to top it off, after each block, you got to do a pivot block, or at least that's how it's taught in the RTS classroom, is you do pivot blocks in between development blocks. So if your momentum isn't really going well, and then you hit a pivot block and then you start another one, it's 2 to 3 weeks or 4 weeks of training that aren't really going in the right direction, and then you hit another pivot block that just kind of neutralizes any progress that you've made. And then you start another development block, and you may or may not have a positive response from the new one. Long story short is how you relate to training is going to influence the relationship you have with these weekly progressions. But now how I train is much more auto-regulative. I don't really pivot or deload unless I really need one, or as Tyson says, let the deloads kind of happen organically. If you've got vacation or you've got to go out of town, or if you're just feeling sick, the deloads kind of come more organically. But if your training is set up in a way where each session you have the opportunity to experience positive momentum, take advantage of that. And that's what I've been doing. Another way to think about your training is having an understanding of your global objectives and then your specific objectives. Your global objectives are the direction training is, the path, the overall path. Where's the destination of the path of your own training? And that destination might change over time, but in general, for me right now and for a lot of my clients, it's to get better at the squat, bench, and deadlift, to ultimately experience a peak of strength expression with the squat, bench, and deadlift. If you know the path that you're going down, you can then set specific objectives within that global objective. The specific objective is, what do I need to do right now to get myself one step forward from where I was before? What's necessary for me to literally move in the right direction and help myself achieve this global objective. And that could be reframing how you experience pain. It could be shifting your exercise from the planned leg press to a 3-1-0 tempo squat. It could be shifting the top set from a top single to a top set of 5. But whatever it is, if you understand how you can manipulate these specific objectives within your training, then you can kind of get a win out of anything that you do, because you're making adjustments in real time based on how you're experiencing life. I had a client ask me specifically about, with Tyson style, I heard Tyson say something in the sense of, does this muscle have more to give right now?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a good way to frame it, but can you expand on that? Like, what you mean by that? Like, how do you know if it does?
Yeah. I love this. How do I articulate this? So I warm up and I work up to my like heaviest weight that I think I can do for some amount of reps. It's like my top performance, my top set. And maybe not immediately after, but I would say like the first like 1 to 3 minutes after that set, I'm like checking in with muscle, like, okay, does this have more to give? And of course you can always do more. Like you could just do eternal drop sets. You can reduce the load, do more, reduce the load, do more. And I guess it is kind of subtly influenced by my previous session's performance. So like, did I do this weight before? Did I just match my previous performance? Did I do slightly better? But I am kind of seeking for a sense of like, do I feel like I could do more? Do I have the energy for more? And also, do I have the mental focus? Is my focus dropping off? And it's kind of a subjective feeling. Like, I don't think there's a clear distinguishing of like, I can't do any more, or
it's like you're falling on the floor dying.
Yeah. But
like, is it effective? Would it be valuable to do more? I feel like that's how I frame it, at least.
Yeah, that's a good way to, would it be nourishing?
Yeah.
I think
you can always give a plant more water, but at some point it's going to drown.
Yeah, I think I like to compare it to like the sensation of being full. Like, you could stop at 80%, you could stop at 90%, you could stop at 100%. And I guess, you could really you could go to an all-you-can-eat buffet and eat as much as you actually can. But there's just kind of like varying degrees of fullness. And similarly so with a muscle, you can develop a sense of like how much is enough. And I think for me, asking that question is really helpful. Like just checking in body sensations of like muscle fatigue or like level of stimulation.
You got this! Same thing!
Let's go, Jack.